father, Swedish author Carolina Sandalberg found comfort in her faith. In 1865, she penned the comforting and encouraging words that became the hymn Day by Day, praising our Lord for his mercies, for they are new every morning, day by day. The music was composed in 1872 by Oscar Harnfeld. So it's a bit of an old hymn, this one. Thanks, Mary. Day by day, and with each passing moment, strength I find to meet my trials here. Trusting in my Father's wise bestowment, I've no cause for worry or for fear. He whose heart is kind beyond all measure gives unto each day what he deems best. Lovingly, it's part of pain and pleasure, mingling toil with peace and rest. Every day the Lord himself is near me, with a special mercy every hour. All my cares he fain would bear and cheer me, he whose name is Counselor and Power. The protection of his child and treasure is a charge that on himself he laid. As your days, your strength shall be in measure. This the pledge to me he made. Help me then in every tribulation, so to trust your promises, O Lord, that I lose not faith's sweet consolation, offered me within your holy word. Help me, Lord, when toil and trouble meeting, to take as from a father's hand, one by one, the days, the moments fleeting, till I reach the promised land. Help me, Lord, when toil and trouble meeting, to take as from a father's hand, one by one, the days, the moments fleeting, till I reach the promised land.
Thank you, Brian and Mari. Thank you. Well, our world is in a mess at the moment, but in the beginning, God created a beautiful world. The earth, the sea, the plants, the trees, the birds, the animals, and the people. And when God had finished his creation, he declared that it was good. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, we read, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. Then it all started to unravel. When Adam and Eve made that disappointing decision to eat the forbidden fruit. I can never for the life of me work out why they chose the fruit from that tree and not the fruit of the tree of life. Anyway, read it and see what you think. That's what they did. And I think we all have an inbuilt tendency to disobey God and to go our own way, to hurt ourselves and to hurt others. And after Adam and Eve made that destructive decision, things went from bad to worse in the world. Their son Cain killed his brother Abel in a jealous fit of rage. And so the first murder was committed on earth. Now you'd think that people would look back and learn from the mistakes of others, wouldn't you? But they never seem to. And often we don't even learn from our own mistakes, do we? So God was unhappy with those first people. Another thing that really annoyed God was the relationship between two groups called the sons of God and the daughters of men. Now, we don't really know who these beings were, but we read in Genesis chapter 6, verse 1, when men began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal, his days will be 120 years. Now some parts of the Bible are difficult to understand. Have you noticed that? And we tend to leave those bits out, you know, and skip over them as though they don't exist. We know some parts of our Bibles very well, don't we? And some verses seem to, I don't know about you, but they take me by surprise, and I think, how long has that been in the Bible? I don't remember seeing that. But it's all the Bible. And if we miss bits out, then it's to our detriment. I was teaching religious education at a school and sharing the office with the head of the religious education, and we were working together on the Year 8 curriculum, so these are kind of 14-year-olds. And we thought, oh, we'll do the key stories in the Bible this semester. So we'll do Adam and Eve and Noah and the flood and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph and King David, you know, those key stories. But then we thought, let's have a bit of fun with this meeting of religious education teachers. And we'll pick out these random stories that nobody's ever heard of in the Bible and say, that's what we're teaching. So that's what we did, and so we said, and we feel these are the key stories, and Balaam's donkey. Well, Balaam's donkey is about a donkey that talked to a man and told him what, you know, God was saying. So the donkey was more in tune with God than the man was, than the prophet was. Anyway, one woman who'd been teaching religious education for years, she said, "Whose donkey? I've never heard of this donkey. You know, what donkey?" And everyone else was kind of looking puzzled and then smiling and then cracking up with laughter, and she's still saying, "I don't know anything about this donkey, how am I going to teach about it?" And she was still going on about the donkey at the end of the meeting. But, you know, sometimes there's some odd stories, aren't there? Well, who on earth were these sons of God and daughters of men? There's various theories on that. Some people think that the sons of God were angels, and so there was intermarriage between angels and humans. Well, that's a bit weird, isn't it? And some people think that they were godly men, and they married the daughters of men who were sinful women. Well, I don't know. Some people think that they were princes who married commoners. Don't know. We don't know. But whoever they were, these sons of God and daughters of men annoyed God by their actions. Then, to make matters more confusing, in Genesis chapter 6 verse 4, it tells that the Nephilim were around that time. Describes them as heroes of old, men of renown. Well, you remember from your Hebrew grammar, that's a joke, that Naphal, the verb Nathal, means to fall. So the Nephilim were the, which is the noun or form of that verb, is the fallen ones. Well, who are these Nephilim? They're referred to again in Numbers chapter 13 verse 33, when on his spying expedition into the land of Canaan, Caleb reported to Moses, we can't attack the people, they were stronger than we are. And he goes on to say that next to the Nephilim, we seem like grasshoppers. So the Nephilim were obviously big, scary beings, and they made a big impression on Caleb and his spies. And in that they're mentioned right next to these daughters of God and sons of God and daughters of men, then we can assume that God's not pleased with the Nephilim either, though it doesn't actually say that. I know you want to hear all of that. At that time, God was not pleased with the world in general. In Genesis chapter 6 verse 5, we read, "The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was evil all the time." Listen to this bit. "The Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain." The heart of God was filled with pain because of the actions of people. So the Lord said, "I will wipe mankind whom I have created from the face of the earth, men and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them." So because of the actions of people, God regretted making the world in the first place. The world that God had been so pleased with. The world that God had declared to be so good. How dreadful that we can cause God such sadness by the things we say and do. God created us so that we can communicate with him and so that we can encourage and support each other. Yet somehow or other, well, I don't know about you, but I forget to pray. And we destroy each other by our negative words, by our lack of empathy, by our lack of help. We need to remember that when we hurt or neglect each other, we grieve the heart of God. So God declared that he was giving up on creation. God had had enough. Well, almost. Luckily for us, we read in Genesis chapter 6 verse 8, Noah found favour in the eyes of the Lord. Noah was the one good person in a totally depraved situation. Noah was the only one who could make a difference. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where a gossip session is annihilating a person's character? We have the choice of joining in with those nasty comments or turning the conversation around and defending that person's reputation. Maybe we could suggest that, well, there might be another way to understand them and what they've said or done. Folks, sometimes we are the only one who can make a difference. Well, Noah found himself in a situation where he was the only one who could make a difference. He was the only one who could save the world. So he dutifully followed God's instructions to build the ark. He diligently measured every plank of wood. He carefully hammered every nail in. Then he rounded up the animals and herded them on board. And in Genesis chapter 6 verse 22 we read these wonderful words. Noah did everything just as God had commanded him. And he convinced his family to join the floating menagerie, his wife and 3 sons and their wives, 8 people, and an assortment of collection of animals. And then we read again in Genesis chapter 7 verse 5, and Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. I hope that can be said of us. We hear that refrain throughout the story. What a faithful fellow Noah was. So after Noah and his family and the animals were safely ensconced in the ark, we read that the rain came down and the floods came up. But all was well for Noah and his family because of the beautiful line in Genesis chapter 7 verse 16. The Lord shut him in. Noah didn't close the door of the ark. God did, and kept them safe. God was in control all the time. Even though disaster struck the world, God was most definitely in control, and he always is. When our lives seem to be falling apart, let's remember that God is in control. God is always there to shut the door on the chaos and keep us safe. Well, it didn't just rain, it poured. In Genesis chapter 7 verse 11 we read, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodwaters of the heavens were opened, and the rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Then, just as all looked lost for the earth, we have the verse that encapsulates the love, mercy, grace and care of God. Genesis chapter 8 verse 1. But God remembered Noah, and all the wild animals and the livestock were with him in the ark. God remembered Noah. When our lives are in chaos, where there seems to be no hope left for us, we are comforted by the fact that God remembers us. God never forgets us. And so the rain stopped and the floods receded, and Noah sent out a raven and then a dove, until eventually the dove brought back an olive leaf, the symbol of peace, but also proof that the land had dried out enough and was fit for habitation. In Genesis chapter 8 verse 18, so Noah came out together with his sons and his wives and their sons' wives and all the animals. And Noah built an altar and committed himself anew to God. And then, amazingly, he sacrificed some of those precious animals that he'd so carefully looked after during the flood. It was a costly sacrifice. It must have really hurt Noah to give up those animals. But God was pleased and responded by declaring that he would never again destroy the whole earth. In Genesis chapter 8 verse 21, never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. So God made a covenant with Noah, and to seal the deal, God put a rainbow in the sky. Now we know the scientific, well some of you probably know the scientific explanation of a rainbow. What is it? Light refracted through the raindrops and it breaks up into its component colour parts. Is it something like that? Come on, all you scientific people. Well, they're pretty anyway in the sky, aren't they? I was coming home from the city one day and there was a beautiful, fully formed arc of a rainbow. I didn't want to stop because the traffic was terrible. And so I wanted to get home and take a photo of this rainbow. And so I drove through Box Hill and I drove through Ringwood, and then, just as I drove into the driveway, the rainbow faded. I didn't get the photo on. I've always wanted to find the end of the rainbow and to see if there's a pot of gold there. But you know what? You can never find the end of a rainbow, can you? If you do, let me know. But rainbows are spectacular, but their religious significance is even greater, because the rainbow represented God's promise to Noah and to us that he would never again destroy the earth. Now, with our media these days, we know what's happening around the world, it's on our television screens. There are earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis and wars throughout the world constantly, but they will never destroy the earth because God said so. So Noah was prepared to stand up and make a difference. Now we might be tempted to think, well, what difference can I make? Nobody listens to me. What difference can I make? Well, Mother Teresa said, the Albanian nun who worked in India for many, many years and formed the Sisters of Mercy, Mother Teresa said, I cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples. We can make a start in changing the world, and then others can join us. We can be God's person in our little corner of the world, making a difference.